we are going to cover one pretty obvious reason and three not so obvious or surprising reasons to make the case for sleeping solo, even if you are partnered, especially if you are partnered. So I'm Dr. Kate. Welcome back to my channel. Stick around to the end. I'm going to share a little bit about the experiment my husband and I have been running for the last 2.5 years and what you may expect from making these changes in your own relationship. So the first and most obvious reason to sleep separately in separate beds and separate rooms is comfort and quality of sleep. So we have been culturally conditioned that to have a healthy relationship, it means we have to sleep together in the same room, in the same bed. We see it on TV, we see it in the movies, everybody's snuggled up, and if that is not your preferred thing, then there's almost a stigma to it. If you tell people you sleep separately, there's almost a, you do what? Are you guys unhappy? Is everything okay? So this bucks that cultural conditioning that we have experienced. Because let's face it, even if you and your significant other have the same aesthetic taste, you have the same, you want the same decorations up, you both love color, you both love neutral or minimalist or maximist, how likely is it that you both prefer the same firmness in your mattress? You both prefer the same temperature at which to sleep. You both prefer the same bedtime and wake up routines. You like going to bed and getting up at the same time. It's probably pretty unlikely. Your bedroom should really be your oasis, the place where you escape from the world, from your responsibilities, from your worries, and you come to rest and rejuvenate. Because when you sleep is when your body heals. It's when your parasympathetic nervous system comes up and says, oh, okay, this is everything that needs to be taken care of. And it does that while we sleep. So if you are not sleeping well and you've looked at everything else, it may be that your body's really asking to sleep by yourself. So now let's talk about those three reasons you might find a little surprising in terms of benefits from sleeping solo, even if you're partnered. The first is that on a subconscious level, when we sleep with someone else and we're in their energy field, we are being conditioned to be as they want us to be, as they think we should be, right? And in relationships, we often try to do that. We want to be what the other person wants us to be. But that typically leads to trouble down the road, right? So when you sleep in your own space, in your own auric field, you are not being conditioned to be as someone else thinks you should be, which brings us to the second surprising benefit. When you are sleeping separately, unconditioned, you are going to be more willing to show up as your true and authentic self in that relationship. It's going to be easier to communicate clearly, to ask for what you need, to ask for what you want, to show up as yourself and not as you think someone else wants you to be. So that brings us to our third surprising reason. It means that as you are more comfortable and more allowed to show up as your true and authentic self, you are creating the space for your partner to do the same. There's not going to be this kind of push and pull on each other's fields. No need to try to manipulate. It's like, oh, I get to show up as I am. You get to show up as you are. And what could be more beautiful in a relationship than that? So you may be wondering, okay, that all sounds great. How is that going to influence and impact my romantic, intimate, partnered relationship? And that is a fair question for sure. My husband and I started this experiment about 2.5 years ago. We've been together 15, and if I'm being completely honest, he had this thought in the beginning. I was not so self-assured and secure in who I was at that point. And from an insecure perspective, I would have taken that personally. I would have thought, oh man, what's wrong with me that you don't want to sleep with me? Why is this happening? So forth and so on. Now, all this time into our relationship, it was like, yeah, okay, I actually like having my own space. Let's see what happens when we do this. So fast forward, we started sleeping separately 2.5 years ago. 2 years ago, we moved to Ecuador. And even up until the last 6 months, it was kind of like I could see he was being less influenced by my emotional wave. He was being like less likely to be sucked into my highs and lows and where I was. And initially, I took that as he's pulling away. That's what my mind said, right? But my body was super relaxed with it and realized that he's just being who he is. He's not allowing me to manipulate or influence him. And whereas I am kind of like a go, 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 do, 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 that's not him at all. So it's been easier for me to accept that we are very different in that regard. And that doesn't mean something's wrong. Like, that is totally okay. So, in this experiment, we're also realizing that we like to eat at different times. We like to eat different foods. We like doing what we want when we want, and not from a selfish, like, no concern for the other person kind of way, but just in a let's flow with this and let this be what it is without placing expectations on the other. So, from a logical level, I feel like I knew that everything would be okay, or maybe that's from a bodily level, because we really did enter into this relationship correctly, right? We were our true selves when we came into the relationship, meaning it wasn't like an incorrect thing. Like, you hear stories of people walking down the aisle and one of them's like, why am I doing this? This is going to be terrible, but you're committed. You've spent all the money, you get married anyway. And then, 2 years, 3 years, 8 years later, you get divorced or whatnot. So knowing that we entered into the relationship correctly put us at a place where we were allowing the other person to be who they are. So in that regard, sleeping separately has really allowed us to grow closer, right? It hasn't put space between us in the way that you might have thought in the beginning. So in terms of how this will influence your relationship, it all depends. Like, did you enter correctly? Did you enter as yourself and not your not self? Because if you did enter as your not self and you do this experiment, you may find that, yeah, you're both more allowing to let the other person be how they be, and yet you're going to grow apart, right? Because you're on different trajectories, you're on different life paths. There's something else and probably someone else out there for you. So that is definitely something to take into consideration. When I talk about this with patients and with other people in terms of the idea of sleeping separately, I typically find that one person in the relationship is really open to that, and the other person is more adamantly opposed. And that may be because they're insecure in the relationship, or that may be because they know this is going to result in them growing apart. So if that describes you right now, you may want to look at that. You may want to choose to move through that, because if you're in a not self relationship and you part ways, that opens up, oftentimes we're just so afraid of the unknown, but the unknown could be amazing. Whatever relationship comes into your life next could be the most amazing, love-filled, authentic thing you've ever experienced in your life. So I would encourage you not to be the person who says, no, we're not doing that. And just try the experiment and see what happens for you. Kind of tune in and ask your body, how long would we need to be having this experiment for me to really see a difference and know and set that time frame and see what happens. I don't expect you to buy into this just because I'm telling you, right? I'm just putting something out on the table. And if you choose to experiment with it, then you can. And if not, that is completely okay. If you are sleeping together and you're sleeping great and it's easy for you to show up as your authentic self and ask for and share what you need and what you want, and you're allowing your partner to do the same, then disregard all of this. What you're doing is obviously working and there is no need to change. If you're listening to that though and your mind is going, yeah, this is not a problem, but your body is saying something differently, then maybe sit with that for a little while. So, yeah, I would love to hear your reflections, your feedback on this. If you think it's a terrible idea, go ahead and tell me in the comments. If you think, I'm curious, then let me know that too. And I'll see you in the next video.